Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mobile Overview Report, the MOVR Report by Sentia Mobile for the first quarter of 2018. That's January 2018 through March 2018. Every quarter, we put together a report on the latest mobile trends, and this quarter, we are going to go through several really interesting items. So let me do some quick introductions. Hello, I am Ken Jones. I'm the Vice President of Marketing at Sentia Mobile. And I apologize, I have a little bit of a cold, so I might sound a little bassy. On the phone with me, or on the webinar with me, is Jon Arne Sæterus over in Norway.
Very good, very good. You're improving every webinar.
I know.
Johan Sæterus is the correct way to pronounce it. As Ken said, I'm a Norwegian based out of Norway, and I am the Vice President of Product and Innovations at Sentia Mobile.
Great. Just a quick overview of the agenda. We'll do our introductions and get into a little overview of what device intelligence is and what device detection is and how it might be used in your industry. And then we'll get into the crux of the Mobile Overview Report, the MOVR Report. This quarter, we have some special topics where we will look at the Samsung S9 launch, and we'll also compare that to the Apple iPhone launches that have been going on at the end of 2017. We're going to look at browser support for WebRTC. That's real-time communications that's built into the browser. Then we'll look at Jpeg 2000. This is a image file format that has had limited adoption to date, but it has great potential for image optimization. And we will kind of show you the capabilities of that and the support for it in certain browsers. And we'll show you how much image optimization you can get and what impact that might have on your business. Then we'll get into the physical capabilities. We at Sentia Mobile have built several new what we call device capabilities into our database, our API, and we can tell you what the thickness, the bezel size, and a couple of other attributes of a device are, and we'll kind of do some overview of what's out there in the market. Then we'll look at the Brazilian market. We've looked at the Brazilian market back in 2015, and we are revisiting it. It's a dynamic market and has changed considerably over the last 3 years. And we'll do a side-by-side comparison to see how things have shifted around. And then finally, we'll do our mobile trends by continent, which is really the heart and soul of the MOVR report that we put out every quarter. People can see some of the top devices, operating systems, and then we'll leave time for some questions at the end. So real quickly, what is device detection? What's it used for? Well, some of the common problems that people have in a mobile-first world is that their mobile user experience might be poor, you can't navigate very well, things are too small to read, the images might load very slowly or cause the page to load very slowly. And for companies that are trying to fix these problems, zeroing in on the problems and making measurements so you can identify problems is difficult. In terms of solutions for these, we provide device detection. What this is it looks at the user agent in a browsing session and can identify the device. And once we know the device, Sentia Mobile's WRFL, that's the acronym for our product that stands for Wireless Universal Resource File. WRFL can tell you all sorts of information about that device, whether it's the screen size or whether it supports certain file formats. There's literally hundreds of different attributes it can tell you. And you can use these to improve, optimize your user experience, target advertisements, and improve the navigation of your website. Likewise, there are solutions that we have that adapt the images and optimize them and deliver them through a content delivery network, or CDN. And then finally, there are solutions that provide you analytics that you can put into your data warehouse and help to identify some of the trends that you're seeing in your mobile sessions. And these problems can cost millions of dollars in lost sales or other poor outcomes for companies. So they really need to pay attention and fix them. Just really quickly looking at the advertisements commerce or industry, they use mobile device detection at the publisher level to identify the brand and the model name. And as you move up through a supply chain where there's this real-time bidding on advertisements, what happens is the information about devices can be passed up the chain through what they call the Open RTB spec. This is the Open Real-Time Bidding specification, and it includes several capabilities that are important to bidding on a advertisement space, but also to help you target and identify segments of customers that you might want to show your advertisements to. And then finally, as you get further up toward the advertiser, they have more incentive to really use interesting device capabilities to identify segments. So whether it's the price of a phone or when it was released, there's a number of capabilities we can help the demand side platforms and advertisers use to target their advertisements. So let's go in and take a look at the Samsung and Apple flagship phones. So these are not necessarily the budget phones, the J series, but the high-end phones that Samsung and or Apple have launched. So in March of 2018, the Samsung launched the Galaxy S9 at Mobile World Congress, and that is this green line way down here at the bottom. And you can see it just starting to tick up. And the just a second. At this point, it's only at 0.1% of all smartphone traffic. But we expect the Samsung S9 to follow the same trajectory as some of its predecessors. So the Samsung S8 right now is around 2.3%, which is about the same level that the Samsung S7, the prior version before that, has reached. So all of these phones are kind of averaging right around 2.5 to 3% once they've gotten to full their full growth in the market. Now this is a bit of a departure from some of the last blockbuster phone that Samsung really had, which was the S5, which reached a peak over 6% of total smartphone market share back in October of 2015. So there's pent-up demand, and that device is still out there in the market. There's pent-up demand that is shifting to these new phones, and also in play for Apple to bid on. Now, looking at the Apple devices, the 3 devices were launched at the end of 2017, that being the Apple iPhone X, the Apple iPhone 8 Plus, and the Apple iPhone 8. All 3 of these are really kind of neck and neck. That's this trend right here. All 3 of them have around 1.7 to 1.9% of the market. And there's still an overhang of several different previous device models that are out there in the market. But in general, we're seeing pretty strong adoption. We anticipate that all 3 of these phones will continue to grow in size. Now, which one will really be the leader? It's hard to say at this point, but given the price point of the iPhone X, which is the most expensive one, it's doing quite well. It's at 1.9%, which is ahead of the 2 or lower price devices. So moving on, let's take a look at the browser market, and specifically some of the web real-time communications capabilities built into that. We haven't really looked at browser usage very often, excuse me, in the MOVR report in the last couple of times around. So I thought it would be good to just level set everyone. So browsers, Chrome is by far the most popular across all device types. So we're including desktops in this figure. So they have 52.9% of the market during 2018 first quarter. Apple Safari holds about 17.9% of that, and Firefox follows with 7.6. The rest is kind of spread out amongst Internet Explorer, kind of an old version. Interestingly, the Microsoft's Internet Explorer at 5.6 has actually got larger market share than their more modern, their current browser, the Edge browser. These other browsers listed here are mobile browsers or web applications that have browsers built into them. Well, what we wanted to look at specifically was the Web RTC, or the real-time communications, which is basically an API that is built into some of these modern browsers. Chrome was probably the first to adopt it. And what it does is it enables developers to build real-time communications capabilities into their web pages. So you can start a peer-to-peer communication with people who might be visiting that web page. There's still a lot of development that needs to be built on top of that API in terms of the interface and that, but some of the core workings required for that peer-to-peer communications are available now in browsers. And we wanted to know, well, what percent of the browsers use this? And it's really a combination of the browser technology and some of the capabilities of the underlying operating system. And in a nutshell, what it is 80% of all traffic that we see today will support WebRTC based upon the browser or the browser version that person is using. If there's an older version, say, of Google Chrome out there, it will not support WebRTC, but most of the traffic that we're seeing today on Google Chrome, in fact, 95% of it, is on a version that's modern enough that it does support WebRTC. The real story here is Safari. Safari started to support WebRTC back in version 11.2 in September of 2017. And because Apple has a pretty good track record of pushing out operating systems and application updates, or browser updates, I should say, this number has gone from 0 up to 75% in 2 quarters. And we anticipate that it will inch higher toward 100% over the next year. The interesting thing is that when you're on Safari, actually, Jan Arne, do you want to explain some of the caveats down here about the mobile Safari and the Facebook on iOS?
Yeah, sure. You've pretty much explained all there is to explain on this slide. Yeah, you're right about the Safari browser. That it's actually pretty impressive to provide 75% supportage on iOS, knowing that support for WebRTC was introduced only at iOS 11. A few months back. Yeah, Safari, and this is also true for Google Chrome, really. We pulled together everything Safari related and Google Chrome related, actually, on mobile devices. This means also in-app browsers or web view based browsers. So it means that you can use WebRTC both directly from the browser, but also inside web views, such as inside the embedded browser in Facebook or Twitter or wherever you're accessing a link from. And this is that's a good thing, because then you can when you're developing a web application that needs WebRTC, or whether it's a VR or AR or a video chat or something type application, you can feel somewhat safe that this will work both in the web browser and also in the in-app browsers. And this is stuff, of course, that Warful will help you detect.
Right, right. And there's actually, this is the applications for WebRTC range from, as you said, augmented reality, virtual reality, to gaming, even in industries such as healthcare, where someone might go to a website and start to interact and talk about health issues with a professional on the other end. The opportunity for real-time communication, not just text-based, is becoming more of a reality, and really kind of promises a very interesting user experience for people going forward. And I should say that's across device, and not just on a desktop, but a lot of the mobile devices. These statistics apply there also. Okay, well, moving on. Let's talk a little bit about JPEG 2000. So before I start, I want to hand it over to Jan Arne and give a explanation of what JPEG 2000 is. I actually first was introduced to JPEG 2000 around the 2002 timeframe, I want to say, when I was working on a project that dealt with motion pictures and film. And I hadn't heard too much about it until about a year ago, when we started looking at this file format, specifically as a way to more efficiently manage file size. So give us a quick overview of what JPEG 2000 is and what it's meant for.
Yeah, so this is a very interesting topic. It is image format, among other things. It was born in 2000, hence the name. But it says JPEG too, but it doesn't really have anything to do with the JPEG that we know from the web. JPEG 2000 was meant to replace the existing JPEG standard, which was created in 1993, if I remember correctly. But apparently, or as we know and see on the web today, this didn't happen, or it hasn't happened yet. And why is that really? JPEG 2000 is a superior format on all fronts, almost all fronts, compared to JPEG. It has a lossless compression. It supports transparency. If you compare a JPEG file of 10K with a JPEG 2000 file of 10K, the JPEG 2000 file would have much better visual quality. There are less visual artifacts on the image, and it also provides low latency, which is important for TV content, like you mentioned, Ken. So there are a lot of stuff that are very good with JPEG 2000, but I guess the problem here is that it's also very advanced. It's impossible for the average web developer to really make use of JPEG 2000 the way it was meant to be. With JPEG, in comparison, it's very easy. You can pull an image through ImageMagick or Photoshop and click a few buttons, and the image is usually okay. But with JPEG 2000, there are so many buttons and flip switches and variables to tweak, depending on the use case of the image, depending on the type of image, what's in the image, the entropy of the image, and so on and so on. So it's difficult to learn, and it's also difficult to, or it's just time consuming. And in addition to that, it's also more CPU intensive. So maybe back in the days when it was first introduced, the browser vendors didn't want to introduce or include this code base because it's a completely new code base. It's not backwards compatible with JPEG. It's a completely new image format. And maybe that was the reason why browsers didn't want to include this in their browsers back in the day, because of the CPU usage and additional code in their browsers. Nowadays there's really no excuse, and but Safari is still the only browser supporting JPEG 2000. On desktop, it was included in 2010, and on mobile iOS it was included in 2012. But still, there are not many JPEG 2000 images to see on the web. But we chose to introduce or include this in Image Engine, which of course has Waterfall sort of under the hood, which can help us identify the safaris that support JPEG 2000. And
so just to interrupt you, so Safari is about 36% of the overall browser market, and what we were looking to do was see what sort of image optimization can occur. So Image Engine is a image optimization solution that will make use of various file formats to deliver a smaller payload to an end user. And we wanted to see, okay, if we shifted from original JPEG to JPEG 2000, what would happen? And so I'll let you go through the good news here.
Yeah. So what would happen? It's of course we went through all the all the don'ts, I guess, or the ways not to do it with JPEG 2000, because in many cases an image is just ruined for no reason really, when you don't know the buttons to turn. But once you figure out all the variables to tweak, it's a very, very efficient format. And like we see on the chart here, if we have a original JPEG file of 50K, the JPEG optimized size would be close to 26K, which is really well optimized. This is state-of-the-art image optimization. It's very, very difficult to do better than that with regular JPEG. But with JPEG 2000, this file is down to almost 22K, which is 57% reduction compared to 49% reduction of JPEG. And this maybe doesn't sound much, but if your site has 500,000 images and you serve 5 terabytes per month, this actually makes a huge deal.
Right.
Both for your end users who experience lighter images, but also for JPEG 2000, in many cases, better quality images than the JPEG alternative.
Right.
And it's also probably worth mentioning that when I say better quality, JPEG 2000 is capable of sort of using different compression rates on different parts of the image, to put it simply. So the background may be more blurred with JPEG 2000, while the details are still crisp and sharp. With JPEG, you have sort of the same compression with visible artifacts all over the image. So visually, JPEG 2000 is by far superior to JPEG 2000. Sorry, JPEG.
So great. Yeah. So this is a tool and a file format that is going to be seen more and more, I think, in the image optimization field. Um, if you can figure out the right settings, as Yanare put out there, it's really a powerful tool for delivering a smaller payload, a faster page load, and a better mobile user experience or desktop user experience. Great. So let's move on to the physical capabilities. So what we did is we have developed um, new device capabilities that around the physical aspects of a phone. And what we've done is, in this case, we're looking at the weight of the device in grams. And we looked at the trends of how devices have changed over the last 3 years. With MOVR, we've been doing this type of reporting for the last 3 years. So we have a database of, many billions. I can't remember what it is. I think we're over 60 billion device hits and observations at this stage. And we can go back 3 years and see how things have changed. So you can see that the green being 2018, in general, we've shifted to the right, that phones in general are a little heavier. Um, Between the 150 and 200 is kind of the most popular size. And in general, we've kind of moved away from these smaller, lighter weight ones. And this is a reflective of the general growth in size of uh, of a device in terms of screen size. We've documented before that screen size is getting bigger, and to be expected, the weight of the device is also moving up. The thickness of a device. This is things are always trying to get smaller, thinner, uh, or functionally uh, more effective. And we've seen that between 7 and 8 millimeters is kind of the standard thickness of the device in 2018. Um, and back in 2015, it was a much more distributed, unconcentrated approach. Likewise, the diagonal size of the device measured in millimeters, we've seen a general growth. You can see that several of the most popular sizes were below 150 millimeters. Now, most of your devices are larger than that 150 millimeter mark. And the bezel size. So this is the bezel, for those that don't know, and I'm always a little unclear, is kind of the strip around the edge of the screen of the device that reflects. Well, there's reasons that it's there, whether it's to provide a space for microphones or speakers or camera. But in general, what's happened is people have kind of moved toward a bezel that is somewhere between 25 millimeters and 35 millimeters. So, we just wanted to throw those in there as a example of new capabilities that we have developed. And we should point out that if people have interest in device capabilities that perhaps aren't documented, feel free to contact us. We're always trying to meet the demands of a changing market. And given the right type of request, there might be a business reason to develop that device capability and do the research. We have an extensive research team that is probably the best in the business. So let's take a look at Brazil. Over the last 3 years, the mobile devices in Brazil have become more and more popular, at least for browsing. I think they were always popular, but the shift from a desktop for browsing to a smartphone for browsing has been pretty pronounced. So back in 2015, 57% of all browsing sessions that we saw were coming from desktops, and that dropped down to 50% in 2018. Conversely, the smartphone sessions, went from 29% in 2015 to 44% in 2018. So a pretty large growth of traffic on smartphones. Interestingly, tablets have kind of waned a little bit in popularity. I think it's probably maybe not so much the physical count of tablets have reduced, but relatively smartphones have grown in popularity. So looking at the manufacturers of the smartphones, the big change here is the Motorola market share. The the market that Motorola was probably the strongest back in 2015 was Brazil. And at that point, they had 25% of the market. Most of that was driven by the popularity of their Moto G model that was kind of the blockbuster phone in Brazil for many years. But over the last 3 years, increasing competition from the likes of Samsung and LG have made the market share of Motorola drop from 25% down to 12%. The Moto G is still out in the market. I think it's on its 5th generation, and it's a little later. We'll see it. But many of the budget models for Samsung, the J5 or the J7, or LG's likewise budget models, have really taken away some of Motorola's share. Apple, in this case, has continued to moderately grow in this area in Brazil, moving from 20% up to 22%. So let's take a look at the top smartphones. In Brazil, back in 2015, as I had mentioned, the Moto G was the phone. It held 10.4% of the market. And at that point in the first quarter of 2015, the second generation Moto G was already out, and it was at 6%. It was followed in the top 10 by the Apple iPhones S, the 5S, the 4S, and the 5, all kind of right after each other. And then a couple of Samsungs got into the act there, the S4 and the Galaxy Grand Quattro. Moving to 2018, interesting change. Google Nexus 5 is actually the most popular phone with 6.8%. And the Moto G, now on its 5th generation, 5G plus, is the only Moto on the top 10 right now, and it stands at 3%. If you want to get a little more information about the Brazilian market, our MOVR report will be available by the end of the day on our website, and we will be contacting everybody who has subscribed to the list to let them know that it's there. There's a little more detail about the Brazilian market in that report. And finally, on the Brazilian side, the use of a mobile network operator by time of day. So across the bottom here, we have the hours, 24 hours in a day, and the percent of the traffic that we're seeing on a mobile network operator. Now that's as opposed to a Wi-Fi communication. So what we've seen in 2015, there was pretty steady use of a mobile network, kind of right around 79%. Well, the peak time was 79% of users in the morning, but it was a pretty consistent line across the day. Moving to 2018, we see that there's a lot more variation in what we're seeing in terms of use of the mobile operator. Now, this has to do with commuting issues, but also the growth of home, business, and public Wi-Fi availability. I think what we're seeing here is that the mobile network was always relatively strong in Brazil, but alternatives with Wi-Fi availability and higher bandwidth and lower costs is becoming more prevalent. Moving on to the continent level analysis, we have in our overall report more detail on this, but just to give you some highlights, that the Apple iPhone 8, the Apple iPhone 8 Plus, and the X are new to the list. They have come in. It's been since their launch back at the end of 2017. We haven't quite seen them on the list yet. So this is the first quarter we've started to see them, and in the U.S. and Oceania, that being Australia and New Zealand, they have pretty strong adoption patterns, and we're continuing to see it grow across a number of different continents. Dropping off the list, we saw the Galaxy Grand Neo, the Grand Prime, and the Samsung S6 drop off kind of the top smartphone list. Another interesting thing is just the general concentration of various markets across the world. Probably one of the most, the North America and Oceania continue to be some of the most concentrated markets, with 67% of the U.S. market made up of these top devices. So people, even though there's hundreds, thousands of devices out there in the market to choose from, a huge percentage of people are going with what I'll call the blockbuster phones. Not so much in Europe or Asia. There's a little more fragmentation going on there. But we continue to see that level of fragmentation, the number of devices grow and accelerate, and that's one of the reasons that device detection is so important, because you have to be prepared for changes in the market and different modes, whether it's smartphones, tablets, smart TVs. So that's the extent of our report right now in the webinar. We will open it up to questions if you have some. Ooh, I don't know what's going on here. I think it jumped to the front. If you have any questions, feel free to write them into the questions panel. And I don't see any right now. So having said that, thank you, everyone. And we will be releasing the report later on today. And we look forward to seeing you next quarter. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.